All right. So, good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're at in the world. It's been a long time since I've collaborated with anyone and made a video. And so I'm just happy to be back in this seat. And today's guest is one who she's actually, when people ask, like, who's your number one person you want to interview? And I was like, ugh, Martha Sweezy. She is my top of the mountain. So here we are in a snow globe moment of, getting to talk with the person who really has changed a lot within how I handle clients, especially around shame and just the impact of shame and how it really, gosh, just how it shows up in every facet of our life. And so, really excited for today. I'm going to pass this over to Martha so she can do her introduction and then just kick us off on shame and your mustard seed of hope with shame because it's a topic that you're very passionate about. So, without further ado, Martha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tara. It's lovely to see you again and to be here. I am, just by way of introduction, I'm in, at the moment, I live in Maine, on in South Portland, Maine, but I come from Massachusetts and I worked for many years in community mental health at a hospital called the Cambridge Health Alliance, which was a fabulous place to be, where I learned a tremendous amount. And very high trauma population, very diverse. And over the years, I thought a lot about the shame that people were bringing into therapy, and what's at the what's at the bottom of the pile up of problems that people bring in. What's the fuel? Where's the engine? And I learned all kinds of different approaches to therapy, and then Dick Schwartz came to town, and I got introduced to IFS, or internal family systems, and that kind of became the lens through which I understood everything I had been learning over the years, including about shame. And I'm an assistant professor part-time at Harvard Medical School, and I am no longer on staff at Cambridge Health Alliance, but I still teach there and am affiliated with research and whatnot that's going on at the Center for Mindful Compassion, which is situated at Cambridge Health Alliance. So I started writing books about IFS as I was a writer in a past incarnation, fiction and playwriting, and so I started writing books when as I got further into IFS, because that's my way of understanding and sort of metabolizing what I'm learning and putting things together. And so I have authored and co-authored articles and books on IFS, and learned a huge amount from co-authors. But that's been a big privilege. And then I sat down as during the pandemic and sort of said to myself, well, this is a good opportunity, and maybe it's kind of now or never to write this book that's been floating around in my head for years about shame and guilt, which to me is the engine of despair, and the item at the bottom of the pile for many people in terms of what keeps trauma traumatic. So that's a little about me.
Yeah. And when people, so as we're having this conversation, I can imagine the defining the difference between shame and guilt, because I definitely was brought up with believing that the way, guilt was used, especially I mean, I'm in Ohio, right? And I'm in a farming community. And so there's definitely this misunderstanding between guilting and shaming. And I don't know if you want to start there just to help people who maybe are just hearing this for the first time of, well, I use those words the same. So are
Right.
they really that different?
Right. And that's very true. People often do use them the same. They conflate shame and guilt and feel like they're on a continuum, but they're really not. Shame, it's a bit very, in very simple terms, shame is I am.
Mhm,
It's an identity. I am something negative. I am bad. I am defective. I am worthless. I am unlovable. I am too much. I am too little, that kind of feeling,
mhm,
which everybody experiences at some point in their life, I believe.
mhm,
And then guilt is I did some behavior that was uh, harmful to somebody else. So that's not my idea. But then the two can get fused. I did wrong, so I am bad, right? And I think that's where it's easy for people to mix them up because they do often get hooked up together. Um, but they're still very different. Guilt is a concern about it. It marks a concern about others. It's social glue. It helps us to know when we are pushing our agenda at the expense of other people in a way that's not going to work socially, and that's going to actually disconnect us rather than connect us. And that can go from small kinds of transgressions to very huge transgressions, right? But guilt is the thing that you want to feel if you have done something that is that you are going to judge ultimately is inappropriate to someone else. Now, that said, your judgment can be skewed by your experience as a child.
mhm,
So if you have been recruited as a child into the job of taking care of adults, if you are what we call parentified as a kid, then, and you had adults who were not able to function in their caretaker role good enough to take care of children, and you were recruited to take care of them, then you're likely going to be kind of trapped by what is called maladaptive guilt. So maladaptive guilt is I'm kind of pursuing my normal developmental goals, and and that's okay. That should be okay, even if it's something that somebody else isn't that happy about. Um, I'm gonna decide, even though my family is the kind of family where everybody moves in next door when they grow up, that I'm gonna move to another state to pursue a job. That's okay. I'm not making everyone happy, but
mhm,
I'm not transgressing against them just because they're unhappy, right?
mhm,
Um, and yet my upbringing tells me that it's my job to take care of other people. And therefore I feel guilty. That is maladaptive guilt. I mean, and you have to go into the weeds on specific situations to decide whether guilt is adaptive or maladaptive.
mhm,
You can't set a rule like here's the line, right? There's all kinds of issues at stake about what can make guilt be maladaptive.
mhm.
But I do think that people um, have the innate wisdom to make those kinds of decisions if they can get what we call an IFS, their parts who have all kinds of agendas to give them some space.
Yeah. So I want to slow this down because I can imagine for some people as they're hearing this potentially for the first time
Mhm.
that one, even having that option of I'm going to do this thing because I want to do it. And it's not me transgressing against this other person. And this is where I believe it probably gets tricky for people is when their action gets perceived as that transgression against the other person.
Right. I mean,
And then
people,
here comes the shaming.
right, right. And people in couples, this is a not an unusual problem for couples. It's like, how much can I pursue my interests if, can I stay late at work if you go into a panic attack if I'm not home at 6?
Hmm.
Right? I mean, and so is that your problem or is that my problem? How are we
Yeah.
going to work this out?
Yeah.
Right? And people work it out in various different ways. But if the person who wants to stay at work for some reason a little later for their career comes to resent and feel angry about the constraints the other person is putting on them because they're not taking a look at why they're having a panic attack at 6 o'clock, then that relationship is going to have problems. And it needs to be sorted out in some ways. It can't be just at the expense of one person because they feel guilty. They're not actually doing anything bad to the other person, but they are, in the other person's experience, causing a bad feeling to come
Mhm.
up, right?
Yeah, and so right there is really, and you like as you're speaking, it's like, oh, right there is so hard when the person's intent is not to be that negative impact,
Right,
and yet it is perceived that way.
right,
And so I want to take you back to that engine of despair. And let's stay with the couple.
right.
Because right here, the engine of despair, I just heard you say it, it's there for both parties if there's not that ability to come back, like to reconnect and negotiate the terms, so to speak.
Right.
And so when that engine of despair shows up,
Mhm.
I guess for people listening and they're starting to have that awareness, this could feel like an ocean of what you're now talking about to them. Like,
Right.
okay, Martha, I'm seeing this now for the first time laid out this way, but it feels really big,
Mhm.
right? That overwhelm comes in.
Right.
Because I have a hunch that overwhelm and despair can be closely related for people.
Yes, I think that's often true. And just to go back to that example, one person wants some more independence in a relationship. The other person wants them to stay very, very close,
Yeah.
be there whenever they need them. That the person who's wanting that more space may feel, if they were kind of queued up, primed in their childhood to be a caretaker, they may feel guilty that they want that space and independence. And so the thought is, I'm doing wrong, so I am bad.
Mhm.
Then to look at shame itself separate from guilt.
Mhm.
What we talk about in IFS is parts, right? That we all have internal parts of us. One part of me wants a sandwich, another part wants to go for a walk, right? That's normal. And it's normal to have conflict around important issues too, and conversations in your head, or just a feeling of discomfort in your body. I can't get comfortable around this issue. So the person who feels guilty and ashamed
Mhm.
for wanting more independence or space is having an internal experience of that, which is not only I'm selfish for wanting this and I'm not being a good partner to this person who I live with who wants me there all the time, but also they have a part inside an internal critic, which almost I bet everyone who's listening to this can identify with, because it's very hard to find somebody who doesn't have an internal critic, right? Who says, you're not only selfish, but you're a bad person because you're selfish. So it goes from you're doing something to you are something, right? That's the link between guilt and shame. And the critic is a shamer. It's a part who exists to inhibit us from being too selfish, too independent, too much me, me, me all the time, and not enough social connection consideration for other people. So we are social animals. We exist in groups and we need the social glue, and shaming ourselves, having a part who shames us into conformity and compliance can start very early. It's a cultural thing, right? It's done in various institutional settings and in families in order to get kids to comply with the norms of that environmental setting, right? And there's a natural tension. Some kids are much more compliant, and their tension is much more internal, and some kids are much less, temperamentally compliant, and their rebellions are much more obvious and out in the open, as they just kind of work to balance between me and us, right? And so there's a lot of individual variance in how people land between me and us. But that's the struggle of childhood, and what we are saying in the approach of IFS is you don't have to do it with shaming. You can do it with kindness and curiosity and connection and compassion. Instead, you can encourage kids to fit in and find their way in a setting, not exile themselves because they have different wants, by being open to all their parts and all their needs, right? Instead of shaming some of them into the closet so that they comply with a very rigid, narrow sense of what it takes to belong.
So even right there, I could imagine people hearing this for the first time. And let's say they had the childhood where their parents, were really using shame for them to conform.
Mhm.
And now they're parents, and this is the way they know how to do it. So the way you just spoke of being compassionate and kind and not shaming, I could imagine that feels like a giant leap for them.
Yeah,
Because it's, well, how to do that and still get your child to do the thing you want them to do, right? To get them to comply to you without using the shame, because like you mentioned, shaming, it's all over the place within society.
right.
And for people who, and I'm going to just name this, people who grew up in a religion, re, there's a lot of depending on the religion and how it's spoken about.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of that conforming message
Mhm.
so that you comply, so that you can be good, right? So when you die, the reward is heaven.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And we all want to be good, right? Everybody
yeah,
wants to be good.
everyone wants to be good.
Everyone wants
And
to be loved. Yeah,
yes, yeah, we all want that. Yeah, love and connection.
right.
And so for a parent who's hearing this of saying, well, that's not how it was for me.
Mhm.
How do I do this compassionate and kindness when I really need my kid to comply so things are easier or things flow for me?
Right. So I'm not going to give an easy answer to that because the tough thing, but actually the kind of wonderful thing is that
Mhm,
you have to do it for yourself first.
mhm,
If you experienced a lot of shaming as a kid, your critic is going to be louder and more buffed up
mhm,
because it got a lot of encouragement in childhood to sort of say this part who wants you to be loved and wants you to belong and has all this good intent for you, is using the tactics it learned that have come down the generations. And it believes it has to try and silence and get out of sight the parts that are of you that are unacceptable, right? So it exiles certain vulnerable young parts, the part who's too loud at dinner, the part who is too needy at bedtime, the part who doesn't like school, the part, whatever, who for whom it's too loud at school and they don't want to be there. So some of this can be biological too, some kids just aren't gonna, they're not they have ADHD or they're high sensitivity or they're autistic or they're this or that, and they're not going to fit into um, the cookie cutter expectations of how a kid ought to be able to survive in school or in the given environment. And those kids tend to get, bullied in school and disappoint their parents and get shamed for these things that people think they can inhibit. Yeah, if I can inhibit that in you, you'll belong and you'll feel better and you'll have a good time in school. So, I'm going to crack down on that element of you. And exiling parts of ourself means we kind of go into the world with that complaint that you can hear so often of, I don't know myself.
Mhm.
How can I get to know myself? I feel lost. I don't know who I am. I don't know why I acted that way. I don't know why I have these needs. I don't know why I just cried. I don't know why I got mad, because we don't, if you exile your important parts of yourself very young, you don't know yourself,
Mhm.
right? It's like you have a system, a family system, and some people are kept in the basement and then the family's down whole, right? But they're down there, knocking on the ceiling saying, "Let us out." So we can feel very lost, and a part can take over with one specific direction and get very strong about that. Well, you just need to go, work all the time, or you just need to go be the best ex or the best mom or this or that. And still people can feel kind of empty and lost, and that didn't work well enough. There's something missing here. And, you just read that, you hear that all the time, or I do. And the parts who have been put out of mind are shamed out of mind. There's a lot of self-inhibition that's going on with this kind of arrangement. And to not convey that, to not bring your own kids up that way, you have to take care of yourself first. You have to let your kids out of the basement and love them up so that the parts of your kid who remind you of the parts of you who you exiled don't drive you nuts, right? So you can be kinder and more accepting with your children because you're kinder and more accepting with yourself. And that is a bit of a journey, but it's a journey that's so liberating and so well worth taking that it not only benefits your children, it benefits you and everybody around you. Just makes life much more fun and easier uh, and benefit more, feeling more beneficial, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate what you were saying because I want to make sure people caught it.
Hmm.
Because when we don't attend to those children that are locked in the basement, we time travel very quickly.
Right.
And so even if you're, a 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80-year-old person, when you don't attend to those children and they're constantly knocking
Inside you, the ones inside.
inside of you, yes, thank you. The ones inside of you that you've really locked away because you were told to, right? That you got that message of these parts of you aren't welcomed here.
Right.
Then I just want you to slow that down because you did such a you spoke about it, articulated so beautifully around that the time travel that actually happens in our system.
Hmm.
And some of us may not even be aware of when that actually happens.
Right. Well, I'll give you the perspective from how IFS teaches about this, right? That which is a very different way of thinking about the mind than we sort of normally, the standard thinking, right? Which is that um, in normal speech, we talk about the past. Well, the past is over, and you just have to put the past behind you
Mhm.
if you can, and why are you still relating to the past as if it's the present? Well, in the what we find when we talk, when we sort of inquire with people about what's going on in their heads and with their parts, we find that parts can literally feel that they live in a different time zone. And, neuroscientists know now that the brain is arranged to time travel. The mind, I should say, is very arranged to time travel. We go back and forth all the time between the past and the present. And what we would say is for parts, there's a very literal experience of I'm stuck in the past. This bad thing is happening to me. It's like Groundhog Day. I can't get out of here. And so when that part comes more does a jailbreak and gets out of the basement for a little while,
Mhm.
and suddenly it seems like what's happening to me now is just like what happened to me when that bad thing happened to me when I was a kid. When somebody is bullying me now is just like when I was at school. I have the same feelings of panic and rage. I don't feel like a grown up. I don't feel like I'm in control or I have anything I can do about this. Why does that happen to me? Why am I so emotional when now I have many more options? Because that part has brought the past into the present, in essence, and your brain is reading what the present situation as if it's the past,
Mhm.
put it that way. And that's incredibly common in ways that we're not even consciously aware of. I walk into a room that has walls painted green and it reminds me of X that happened, in a green room 20 years ago. And I'm not even registering that. The green in the wall of the walls does that for me.
Mhm.
So the past is constantly intruding into the present, and we would say in IFS that that's a part who is stuck in the past, saying, "Don't run away from me. I've been left behind.
Mhm.
You locked me in the basement years ago so that you wouldn't feel these feelings and you could go on with life, but I still feel these feelings. I'm stuck down here. I'm the despair at the back of your head when you try and go to sleep at night. I need help, get me out of here." And what we're saying in IFS is we can get those parts out of there, which is a strange way of thinking about it, right? That those parts can literally be stuck in the past and they can literally decide when they feel safe and connected enough and they're invited back into your present day conscious awareness, they can come out of the past and be liberated, unburdened from the beliefs they developed during a bad thing happening, like I'm worthless and I'm unlovable.
Mhm.
They can let go of that and feel when they feel loved and valued and included, and they can come live in the present, not as, the 5-year-old who had a bad thing happen at school, um, is is going to still be 5 years old when
Mhm.
it time travels. It's not going to suddenly grow up. That's the strange thing about it. So now you have access in a wonderful way to all the different perspectives and joys of different developmental ages if you bring those parts out of the basement and bring them to the present and help them with whatever traumatized them at that time. And you can literally do that, right?
Yeah. So this is what I heard you saying too, is that some of that engine of despair, and probably the majority of it, is in the basement being fueled by whoever is in the basement with it.
Right. Right. You've locked up your 5-year-old, your 8-year-old, your 10-year-old. They're down there. Kids shouldn't be left alone in basements, basically, right?
Yeah.
Um, they're desperate for validation. They're desperate for rescue. They're desperate for to be witnessed, to have the reality of their experience acknowledged and what it meant to them, so that it's not, minimized, dismissed, or in some other way invalidated by other people or by your critical parts, right? By parts who put them in the basement in the first place because they were getting in the way of living and surviving as a child.
And so I want people to really hear this because these little ones take on the message and belief. So they're being, and I want to make sure I'm getting this right. They're
Yeah,
being shamed.
right,
They take on that message or belief, and now they're the holder of the shamefulness of that message and belief.
right. Now, just to be clear,
Yep.
just because someone shames you doesn't mean you're going to believe it and your system's going to take it in as an accurate assessment of who you are. So that's a step that has to happen. In other words, some kids who are very confident and have a lot of backup, or they're just resilient in a sort of temperamental way, will get bullied and they'll go, huh, who cares? That's not me. I don't need to pay attention to that stuff. And they fight back, right?
Hmm.
But and other kids are vulnerable and they take it in for all kinds of reasons as accurate information about their value and their worth. Right. So you can't say just because you got shamed, you're going to feel shameful. But
Hmm.
once you feel shameful, this whole internal dynamic gets going where there are protective parts step up to try to manage, improve that shameful part, hide that shameful part, so that you externally can go on trying to fit in and have a social life and belong and, be loved.
Yeah. So I really want people to hear that when your part really takes on the identity of the message, that's when it's the shamefulness. Do I have that right, Martha?
Right, right,
Versus if here comes this message and your system goes, that's not my truth.
right. It's not
And I'm
me.
just going to let it hit and go.
Right. I don't identify with that. The
Yeah.
minute you identify with it and it becomes your identity, then you have a problem.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. So, and one of the things that I hear the most, and I know this is taught in the training,
Mhm.
what's the one thing that stops people from even thinking about going to that basement door, that internal basement door, is the fear of overwhelm.
Right. It's because, like, if you've locked these children in the basement, you open the door, there's going to be a crush to kind of get out of there. Let me out. And
Hmm.
and I want you to know what I feel and what I went through, right? So it's like boom, you're overwhelmed with the feelings, you're overwhelmed with the flashbacks, you're overwhelmed with the sense of insecurity and smallness and all this stuff that doesn't actually fit your adult existence today, but it comes flooding back and takes over. And then what happens, and this is what protectors are trying to avoid, is the suicide part comes in and says, I look, you're not, no one handled this. Nobody could shut this down. This is unbearable.
Hmm.
I'm the one who can help with this pain. I know how to end it, and I'm the only one who knows how to end it. And that part, sometimes just having a part who says that can calm everybody down.
Hmm.
They're scared of that. They don't want to die, actually. And so that can become habitual, like just having a suicide thought is a self-regulator, right? But it also becomes very risky because in the moments of highest stress, there's the danger that the suicide part will take over and act. And even some other parts will say, okay, go ahead, that's it. This is unbearable. There is no help, and it's not worth living.
Yeah, and so right here, I can imagine a lot of times when you mention suicide, people's systems clam up
Mhm,
for many different reasons.
mhm.
And, one of the biggest ones is in our society, we don't, we punish suicidal thoughts,
Right. Well, we
right?
try to inhibit them.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's that the among protectors, there are two different styles. One is inhibit, those are kind of proactive manager protectors that we all have, who are constantly telling us what not to do and what to do, and sort of trying to get us to fit in and be and belong, and conform. And then there are the protectors who ultimately can't stand that, and because it's tipping the ship over in one direction, and they come in with disinhibition. They're reactive, and because inhibitory protectors ultimately go overboard if things are extreme, and they become too critical, too shaming, and then that can lead again to a suicide part stepping in. So disinhibiting protectors will come in on the other side and say, let's have a drink, let's get stoned, let's go jump off a cliff with wings and see how that feels, whatever people do to get a rush, right? Do some ultimate skiing or, ultimate marathoning or something. People have all kinds of different ways of managing with another extreme that distracts or self-soothes and prevents that suicide part from coming in.
And what I often see, and this is just, and I hear it, right? When I'm out in the world and I'm listening to people, I'm
Mhm.
always, there's such a denial that their system has suicide in it.
Everybody's system has the potential, if they've never heard from that part, and most people have heard from that part at some point, but if they haven't heard from that part, they still have the potential to hear from it in extremity. I mean, it's just I don't have to put up with this thought, if things get too bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's
And
natural. It's
I,
not.
and what's crucial for people to really hear is, and I frame it this way because I do believe that suicidal part has such a negative, because it has a huge impact and it's a lasting impact. And for loved ones, it's a terrifying impact. So I want to name that.
Right.
And this part inside, I say it's actual, it has elements of love in it
Mhm.
because their person is suffering so much that they want to end their suffering. They want to end the despair.
Right. The intention of suicide parts and all protectors is good. It's like I'm going to help with pain. All the tactics that Freud called defenses, all the stuff that people called neurotic for years and years, and that we would now call, coping or defensive styles in normal talk, right? Because everyone's pretty psychologized about this stuff. Those are strategies that are well-meaning for me. I mean, if I'm drinking myself into a hole every night, that's not good for my partner or my family or my colleagues, but the part means well for me. That's who it's thinking about. And it's trying to keep me from going up that ladder to a higher level of solution, which is suicide.
Hmm. So even right there, you now hit on something for some people who really got that message around how different coping strategies, right? Because here comes more of the shaming
Mhm.
on drinking is bad. If you drink, you are a bad person.
Right,
If you do drugs, you're a bad person.
right.
And I believe it's Gabor Mate who says it's not why the addiction, it's why the pain or it's why the hurt.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
he's brilliant on this topic. And
yeah. And so what I hear there is who's in your basement?
right, exactly. And that's what we, guide. I mean, all therapy will sort of guide people well, no, I shouldn't say that because CBT specifically does not guide people to look in their basements, but the basement starts, echoing into the therapy no matter what. And Family systems was also originally started as we don't have to look in the basement. We can just talk about what's happening now between people and get that into a better shape and have people treat each other better. And then they can go on. It's all about the present. And yet, as Dick Schwartz, who developed IFS, found when he was a family systems therapist. Uh, he couldn't get away from the basement. the basement turned out to be, where the action was.
Mhm.
So,
And a lot of times too, with that fear of overwhelm, because there's that fear of overwhelm, and then this almost, it always feels like an additional layer. And it's one for, it's like you have that fear of the overwhelms here. And if you actually drop past that layer, it's landing in all the grief.
oh, absolutely. But before you do, let me just say, for people who are listening, that the parts who have been in the basement, even though they're desperate, even though they are going to rush the door if they don't get any help not to do that, can, if we connect with them, they can agree and get moved to a safer place and agree not to rush the door so they can not overwhelm. And if they need some connection, some reassurance, some we're coming for you, don't worry, but we can't do an end run around protectors because you'll just get backlash, you'll be locked deeper in the basement. So we don't, and those parts can make a rational decision, even if they're really young, to not rush the door and to not overwhelm. And if they do, the more the person is aware of them and can get some distance from them, zoom out on seeing that they have had these parts locked in the basement, the more they can, if the strong feelings come up, the more they can have some separation from them and be reassuring even when feeling something strongly.
Mhm,
Like, I see you're really upset. I feel it. I'm still here. I'm here for you. I am coming for you. I am going to take care of you. I need to go talk to this part who wants to have a drink right now in response to your feelings because that's not helping. So let me help that part first, then I'll come back to you.
mhm. And I want to name right here. So I want to, and this is from my own journey, what Martha just showed right there. My system, right? My brain, I was had a lot of CBT. And
Mhm.
so my brain resisted this whole possibility that these parts are inside. They have individual voices. They all need tending to.
Right,
And so the resistance to this idea of I'm multiple, because I carried shame around. So you want me to essentially have multiple personalities, right? I had so much, my system had so much resistance to this because
Mhm.
what you just said out loud, when I first heard that, I'm like, that sounds insane. That's like, that's no, no, no. I have one voice. It's me. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
So I could imagine there's people listening who are probably sitting in a similar seat, maybe the same row as what I was in, and saying, this doesn't make sense, Martha.
Right.
Like, how?
Although it makes a lot more sense actually than thinking of yourself as singular.
Hmm,
All the evidence in your head, in my head, in the heads of every person who's listening says the opposite, which is that um, I am not one thing. That would be incredibly boring. If when I wanted to go have a sandwich, I didn't have any thought except that I'll have a chicken sandwich every day because that's me. That's the only, that's I don't have any differences of opinion internally. Like maybe I should have an arugula sandwich today, or maybe I should, go out to lunch. If I never had any of that, then I would be pretty boring. Life would be very boring, and I would not be appreciating all the options I have in life, right?
mhm,
The world is a very complicated place. If I was like a single cell, and even single cells, if you get down to looking at it, are incredibly complex and have multiple parts. But if there was some way of getting down to a thing that was singular in the world, I don't know what it would be. Then, then you wouldn't, I don't know what you'd have. You'd have stasis, I guess. You'd have nothingness.
Mhm.
Life is about multiplicity. It's about systems. And we are a system. Our bodies are systems and our minds are systems.
Mhm.
And that's a good thing. It's not crazy. It has been internal conflict has been pathologized in the field of mental health by, I would say, manager parts, basically, who wanted to be in charge and who wanted to say, this is the right way of doing things, and this is what should exist and what shouldn't exist, and this is how you should be. And if you were this way, then everyone would be happy with you. And, I mean, good therapy doesn't do that, of course, but there's a pull, uh, a social pull that can permeate therapy, which is about conforming and complying, which inevitably exiles some parts of a system. And when you exile some parts of the system, you're expending a lot of energy to do it, and you're not getting the potential wealth of that system, all those different perspectives. So it's a good thing to be multiple. And all you have to do is pay attention to yourself internally for a minute, and you'll notice that you are multiple, right?
Mhm.
You are not in agreement with yourself. It takes two to have conflict, at least.
Mhm.
Everybody has internal conflict.
I love the way you just said that. So people, let's say they're hearing this for the first time, and now you're offering that instead of them being just a pen, that you can click this pen and there's multiple colors of ink,
Right,
and yet it's still one pen.
right. Yeah, everything can be broken down into more parts.
Hmm. And
Pens,
so, oh, go
people.
ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, you actually said the way to do it, and I wanted to make sure people caught that.
Okay,
That the first step is just taking that pause and listening internally.
right. Paying attention. Your attention is everything in terms of your mental health.
Mhm.
Your ability to, and you may have parts who don't want you to pay attention inside. And that's information for you too. It'll be like, no, if I pay attention to that, I'm going to notice emotional distress or
Mhm.
sadness or anger or, one of those feelings that doesn't like, why do I need feelings? That just gets in my way. I can't get along with people when I have those feelings. I don't behave well when I have those feelings. I get stuck when I have those feelings. So what do I need them for? That's a part. So who has had the job of trying to handle complex situations that you couldn't get out of at one point in life by simplifying them to don't feel it, don't know it, don't feel it, don't pay attention to it. And so it's true, when you pay attention to it, you're opening that door again.
Mhm.
But and you shouldn't, if you're scared of it, don't do it alone. Do it with help, right? Because it can be overwhelming. But there are strategies that someone who knows the road with this kind of approach can help you to do this safely, to do that internal inquiry safely, get everybody out of the basement, love them up, and enrich your life.
Mhm. And even right there, and I hope people really, really heard you say a lot of it is your ability to learn how to connect when disconnection is what was really taught to them.
Right. And it's scary to break that rule,
Yes.
because it can mean like, wait a minute, if I break this rule, am I going to get kicked out of my family? Am I
Hmm.
my most important relationships? I have operated by this system, this operating system my whole life, and now I'm going to break the rules of that operating system. That's, what's going to happen to me if I do that. But And people usually don't come to do that in therapy unless they're desperate, actually. Something has driven them to the point where they're like, this isn't working. I don't understand why. I don't understand what it is, but I know I'm in so much distress that I need to pay attention finally to it.
Yeah. And so what I love about that too is that what I hear, and I do believe a lot of people, I don't know if it's that they ignore this or their window of tolerance just extends, because usually it's the manager who
Yeah,
brings the client for help
right.
because there's something, right? There's an imbalance. So usually there's a behavior that's really wreaking havoc.
Right.
And so I really want people to hear, even right there, there's that one who's wreaking havoc is still getting that message of shame.
Right. Which is inhibiting. The goal of shaming internally is to inhibit something that the part who's doing the inhibiting believes is going to get in the way of you being acceptable and lovable, being good, being a good person, which is what
And
we all.
yeah, and this is something that shows up too. And I want, so people were like, yeah, I'm still not connecting with this. I would take this then to your workplace.
Yeah,
So the high achievers,
right.
it's what's your engine, right? What's driving your engine of achievement.
And you'll only notice it if the costs start to accrue. In other words, if you're just feeling like you're a success and that working 70-hour weeks is great and you're getting rewarded and you're making more money and whatever, whatever, then you're not going to, certainly not going to seek therapy and you're not going to notice until something starts to be costly to you. Because that manager part of you is going to be very happy with that. We're doing it right. The outcome is good. Everything's the way I planned it, right? But then you find that you can't sleep and you're getting up in the night and drinking a bottle of wine. Well, that's getting in the way of this plan because I don't feel as sharp in the morning to go back for my 10-hour work day. Um, and so it's not the one part who becomes extreme causes problems that other parts then try to solve. I'm drinking that bottle of wine because I'm waking up in the night with a part who feels lonely and depressed and abandoned because I'm working all the time and doesn't like how I'm relating to people at work, or whatever. Right. So that part is doing a jailbreak in the middle of the night and then causing another part to have to solve that problem with too much drinking. And then boom, you're off to the races with a problem that becomes visible, right? An imbalance that is now costing you.
Mhm. I also let's also go to the workers who just feel undervalued.
Oh yeah, well that's endemic in this country because
Mhm.
so many people have jobs that have that where they're not asked to have any initiative or put anything in on their own or have any creativity or commit. They're just there to do what they're told, right? And if you're in that kind of job, it's boring.
Mhm.
It's alienating. It's boring. And you're also treated like you're dispensable. Well, you could get fired tomorrow, or if you're say waiting tables and you don't get a day off. And if your kid is sick or you're sick, nobody's gonna pay you for that day, right? And no one's gonna cover it for you. So there's an inhumaneness to a lot of work in this country that has become pretty extreme for a lot of folks.
Yeah, and what I want people to hear right there is because underneath that, there's a message your system's interpreting that may not be happening in the mind level, but is happening at that body level.
Right.
And that can also be the reason you have insomnia or you are getting up in the middle of the night and drinking that bottle of wine.
I'm not valued. I'm not
Mhm.
valuable. I'm replaceable, which people get told.
Mhm.
I don't have a voice in this. It's a degraded situation for those kinds of work conditions.
Yeah. So we only have a couple minutes left. So, Martha, I'm just curious for people who are, because I have your book, right? This is a great book. Um, but it's more, I would say, for people they're just starting to get introduced to this idea of shame and guilt.
Right.
What path would you, I mean, just for them to start to go down, for them to maybe they want to hit it at that cognitive level first, right? They want to go top down.
Right.
How for them to do this? Like, what would you recommend for them if they just want to, gosh, just get their toe in that water and not get swallowed up by that wave?
Recommend the next book I'm writing, which is going to be for people who aren't therapists. I haven't written it yet, but yeah, I mean, I think there is this perspective. There's a lot written about shame, and people can read about that. There are a lot of books, but I have not found anybody who has the particular combination of looking at the mind as plural and how shaming internally fits into kind of survival plan that is pretty endemic that a lot of people have and what that means for kind of governing ourselves by shaming ourselves, how that affects us across the board. So I do plan to write about that more, but I think that people can just take the idea, which is what I teach, of shame as a verb. Shame is not like a rain cloud that comes over you and stops and rains on you. It's something that it's an active uh, dynamic inside of you. If somebody shames you externally, and there are plenty of opportunities for that in life, starting in childhood but continuing, and then it lands in you in a vulnerable spot, and your system begins to try to manage that verdict about your value by cutting off your awareness of certain elements of yourself and your needs, and your personality, who you are. I'm shy. I'm not shy. I'm scared. I'm exuberant and wild. Those kinds of things. Instead of cutting yourself down to size to fit in, if you can then come find those parts of yourself and bring them back, that's what I would recommend. It's like finding, can be therapy, it can be some kind of activity, be paint if you want to paint and you haven't painted, go take a dance class, something that challenges an inhibition that has in some way cost you in your life. Go challenge it back. Go do stuff that you haven't allowed yourself to do, and talk back to that internal critic because it means well for you. It doesn't, it can be very harsh, but if you ask it to stop doing that nonsense and tell you what it's really worried about, often it will say, well, I don't want you to be hurt again. I never want that to happen to you again. So I've been trying to make you good. And so you can have a reasonable conversation with that part and say, I get it. That was totally helpful then. Now we don't really need to do it that way. How about being a cheerleader instead of a critic? How about if we go try stuff that we weren't allowed to try, if we be who we weren't allowed to be, and you can give me feedback about how it's going, but no need to criticize anyone anymore because inner critics terrorize other parts. They inhibit other parts. And the more they do that, the more they pull for these parts who become extremely disinhibited at times too. So it kind of you want to soften your internal system with a lot of attention, a lot of curiosity, and a lot of love. These parts are just trying to help you, and ask the parts who have been exiled to not overwhelm, to have a little. They've been patient for years. They've had to be patient and let you make friends with these scared protectors, um, before you come to them, and then get help to come to those exiled parts. Find somebody, who can help you out with that, because that can be the most challenging piece of an inner inquiry.
Mm. So what I really heard
Yeah.
was, and maybe this is a phrase for people to try on as they're going out and trying the things that they never have had permission to do,
Right.
is I'm not my critic, it's a teammate.
Yeah, it's a teammate who's got a tactic that, should have an expiration date, right?
Hmm.
It's like, leave the milk in the refrigerator for years.
Yeah.
Uh, And this tactic worked once and it may have been important in a certain setting, but life is different now if you're grown up, and we don't need to do things that way anymore. I have resources as an adult that I didn't have as a kid. I'm not hopeless and helpless, and I can find support if I need it. But I have choices now, and that's the most important thing. Kids don't often have choices. So these parts are living in a time, they're not in sync with reality often.
Yeah. So, folks, I really want you to hear, as this critic's learning to potentially do this differently with you, that it needs patience as well.
Right. You got to love your critics.
Yeah.
It's transformative for them because they don't expect that. Everybody inside hates the critic, they're
Yeah.
scared of it, they hate it, and they're tortured by it. And you come in, zoom out, get the bird's eye view on these parts, see how they're just trying to help, and offer them a lot of praise and consideration, respect, and invite them to try new things.
Martha, I love that. That just it feels warm in my system. I hope that's how it lands for others, to really, gosh, start befriending the critic.
Right.
And just want to thank you so much for your time. And I'll put where to for people to go to your website and how to reach you. Anything else around that, or just follow that your website if they want more connection with your
Yeah,
work.
on my website, I'm doing a podcast with Hannah Sumarai and Fiona Kate Rice, which is called IFS Chitchat. It's
Mm.
on Spotify. It's fun, and we talk more about these kinds of subjects there, on a monthly basis. It's just the three of us talking about all this IFS stuff. So that's one thing. And I have my books, all the various books on my website. So people can find information if they're interested in learning more.
Ah, awesome. Thank you so much, Martha.
Thank you, Tara. It's been really fun. Appreciate it.